again, everyone. With the recent release of the Oblivion remaster and all the hype around Oblivion, I thought I would go over the lore of the Daedric Prince Mehrunes Dagon. As usual, there will be links and timestamps in the description. Mehrunes Dagon is known by many names. He is known as the Black Daedra Lord, Lord of Change, Prince of Ambition, Prince of Disaster and Ambition, Prince of Disaster and Destruction, the Master of Razors, Sovereign of Destruction, the Flame Tyrant, the Father of Cataclysm, the Golden Flame, the Flame Father, and the Mare Pride's End. If anyone can remember all of that off of the top of their head, they'll certainly have impressed me. Mehrunes Dagon's sphere of influence revolves around destruction, change, revolution, energy, and ambition. He tends to be associated with natural disasters like fire or earthquakes, and some natural disasters are even believed to be linked to communions between Mehrunes and his followers. The prince is also credited with authoring the Mysterium Xarxes, and it is said his hunger for destruction is insatiable. Mehrunes' penchant for destruction is not thought to be without purpose, though. It is believed that the destruction he craves is intended as a means of change and outright rebellion. There is a belief that Mehrunes Dagon is allied with Hircine, though Lyrinth, the Fool Killer, claims that if such an arrangement exists, it would be obscured to anyone outside of their circle. Enemies of the Prince of Destruction include Ebenarm, Akatosh, and Molag Bal, with whom Dagon shares a bitter rivalry. The two have been known to interfere with each other's schemes whenever possible. It is also rumored that Mehrunes hates Nocturnal. Now quickly covering Mysterium Xarxes. When I walk the earth again, the faithful among you shall receive your reward, to be set above all other mortals forever. As for the rest, the weak shall be winnowed, the timid shall be cast down, the mighty shall tremble at my feet and pray for pardon. An excerpt from a literal translation of the Mysterium Xarxes, provided by the Imperial Library, a link to which will be provided in the description as well. Little is actually known of the Mysterium Xarxes beyond the translations given in Menkar Cameron's commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes. These commentaries were used in the Third Era to recruit members into Dagon's cult, the Mythic Dawn. These commentaries also contain a peculiar account of the prince's origins. According to the commentaries, the Magna Gay secretly created Mehrunes Dagon in the very bowels of Lig. It is said that Lig is an adjacent place, or a sort of parallel version of Tamriel. This domain was at the behest of an entity known only as the Upstart Who Vanishes. Lig, or the Mundex Terrene, was once ruled by Dread Kings from the 19 and 9 and 9 seas, who waged endless wars against each other's so-called slave oceans. Dagon was said to have been created to be a good prince, who is imbued with the most precious asset of Oblivion, hope. The prince is said to have began a revolution, threw down Lig, and cracked his face. He then let the lowly slaves know free will, and stirred them to violence against their masters. His so-called Red Legion overthrew the tyrant dregs, toppled the towers of Kimel Garig, destroyed great cities, and slaughtered the Templars of the Upstart. Hope spread like a brush fire, and Lig was set free, hence his title as the Sea's Flame Redeemer. Regardless of the veracity of this account, the tome played a major role in the assassination of Uriel Septim VII and his heirs, causing the Oblivion Crisis. Another story from an obscure Nord myth provides an alternative origin of the prince, claiming him to have once been a kinder being who was cursed by Alduin. And the Leaper Demon King saw a possible way out of this mess for himself, but he nodded too eagerly, saying, "Yes, yes, yes, yes." And the dragon knew that only mercy he might give to this little demon would not result in any true learning, so he cursed the king of the Leapers, calling him Dagon, saying the greedy man has already fucked himself, hiding inside something that didn't exist anymore, but you I curse right here and right now. I take away your ability to jump and jump and jump and doom you to the void where you will not be able to leave, except for auspicious days long between one and another, and even so only through hard work. And it will be this way, my little corner cutter, until you have destroyed all that in the world which you have stolen from earlier kalpas, which is to say, probably never at all. Excerpt from Fight 1, The Eating Birth of Dagon, a part of the 7 fights of the Aldudagga, from the Bethesda Softworks forum. Next we have general worship and culture. Mehrunes Dagon is a particularly nasty character among the gallery of horrors from Oblivion. He revels in destruction on a grand scale, from deaths caused by floods or earthquakes, to mass murders, and enjoys making a show of any influence he can exert on Nirn. His penchant for flagrant displays of power makes it no surprise that his cults draw more membership than those of the less conspicuous princes. Excerpt from Thwarting the Daedra, Mehrunes Dagon. The worshippers of the Prince of Destruction are known as Dagonites or Dagonists. Mehrunes is revered by many Daedra-worshipping groups, such as the Crimson Oath, who call themselves the Oathsworn of the Red Father, Scarlet Reavers of the Razor King, and the Bloodletters of the Fire-Veined God. To most cultures, however, Mehrunes is little more than a god of bloodshed and betrayal, as he revels in grand destructions, and leaves behind swaths of devastation in his wake, wherever he manifests. In fact, even attempting to summon the prince is frequently fatal to those involved, and any who may be nearby. Dealing with Dagon and his followers is abhorred by most of Tamriel and is outright illegal in many places, with the punishment potentially being as severe as death. Mehrunes has a vested interest in flagrant displays of power in order to attract more followers to his various cults and assert his influence on Nirn. He is an especially important deity in Morrowind, where he is the second of the 4 corners of the House of Troubles. Malakath, Mehrunes Dagon, Molag Bal, and Sheogorath are holy in that they serve the role of obstacles during the testing. Through time they have sometimes become associated with local enemies, like Nords, Akaviri, or Mountain Orcs. An excerpt from The House of Troubles. The worshippers of Dagon tend to be arsonists, setting buildings, animals, and even people on fire. Signs of cult activity may include unusual tremors, an uncharacteristic lack of rain, and sudden onsets of unseasonably heavy rain, as they attempt to incite natural disasters. Those who worship the prince tend to bear the symbol of a fiery rising sun. Now we have the cultural significance of Mehrunes Dagon to the Argonians. The Sul-Xan tribe consists of Naga worshippers of chaos and death, and see Mehrunes Dagon as the so-called true egg child of Sithis. This title can be understood from a pre-Duskfall perspective, when the old ruling class of Blackmarsh believed that Sithis was a malevolent, destructive force, much like Dagon. The Sul-Xan embrace only the darkest, cruelest beliefs and scorn the rest as weakness. Thus they sacrifice outsiders and other Argonians alike in hopes of one day summoning Mehrunes Dagon to bring blood and destruction across Blackmarsh and eventually the entire world. It is from a time long ago, a time forgotten, but it will serve us well. It is ours to take and to feed. It will need many to become full and bring forth the spirit of destruction. The spirit will burn fields and fill the swamps with blood. It will sow chaos wherever it touches, so long as we are able to bring it here. But the idol remains so very hungry. We need more bodies for the rituals. Does the spirit enjoy their screams? We will make many more. An excerpt from a Sul-Xan Note. The Sul-Xan's worship of this prince is an anomaly, however, as Argonian society largely does not venerate any of the powers of Oblivion. In fact, there are no words in their language, Gel, to describe any of the Daedra. As explained by a native speaker during the interregnum, the Argonians do not taint their language with words for abominations from Oblivion. Instead, they use common words from other widely spoken languages to refer to the creatures. Relevance in Dunmer culture. In Morrowind, formerly known as Resdain, it is said that when the prophet Veloth led the Chimer to Resdain, they were joined by a number of Daedric ancestor spirits, with Mehrunes being among them. At first, these Daedra lords were worshipped as gods. However, when the Tribunal came to power in the early First Era, Daedra were venerated as lesser spirits, subservient to the Almsivi. According to Dunmer legend, Mehrunes Dagon once threatened to heave a giant rock at the Dunmer city of Margan, but Vivec outwitted the prince by taunting Dagon and making himself the rock's target. The rock itself was enshrined and became a pilgrimage site. Pilgrims would come to recreate the situation by taunting a Daedra bound by Vivec, known as Anhedra, where he would attempt to harm them while they were protected by a powerful blessing. Another legend describes a duel between Vivec and the Prince of Destruction, in which the prince was unarmed. It is said that rather than dishonor himself by fighting an unarmed opponent, Vivec offered Dagon his own silver longsword. The Princess Dremora were impressed by his honorable act of chivalry. The temple claims that although they are enemies, the Dremora share a bond of respect and courtesy with the followers of the Tribunal. As a part of the pilgrimage of the Seven Graces, pilgrims seeking to join the temple must visit the Shrine of Courtesy in Vivec City's Puzzle Canal. Here, pilgrims fill the role of Vivec by offering a silver longsword to Krast, a Dremora filling the role of Dagon. In a battle with Mehrunes Dagon, Vivec gave his own silver longsword to the Daedra Lord rather than dishonor himself by fighting an unarmed foe. This so impressed the Dremora, the most honorable and chivalrous of Mehrunes Dagon's servants, that they now share a bond of respect and courtesy with the followers of the Tribunal. Though we must never forget that they are our enemies. Excerpt from The Pilgrim's Path. Next is the role that Mehrunes Dagon plays in Khajiit culture. To the Khajiit, Mehrunes is known as Mehrunes, spelled M-E-R-R-U-N-Z, or as Mehrunes. They also call him Dagon, the Fire Cat, and the Demon Cat. Believed to be one of Fatomai's second litter, the Khajiit's version of Patome, Mehrunes was given the nickname Ja Khajiit, or Kitten, in Tagra, the Khajiit language, by his own mother due to his wild and destructive nature. The Khajiit often depict him as a destructive kitten because of this. And Anhur said, "We should have more children to share our happiness," and Fatomai agreed, and she gave birth to Hermora, and she gave birth to Hircine, and she gave birth to Mehrunes, and Mephala, and Sengen, and Shegarath, and many others. Hermora, you are the tides, for who can say whether the moons predict the tides or the tides predict the moons? Hircine, you are the hungry cat, for what hunts better than a cat with an empty belly? Mehrunes, you are Ja Khajiit, for what is more destructive than a kitten? An excerpt from the words of clan mother Ahnissi to her favorite daughter. According to pre-Redata texts, Mehrunes was exiled by his father Anhur, the Khajiit aspect of Anu, and rather than journeying through the many paths of time, he chose to venture into the great darkness, whereupon he was defeated and tortured by the demon king Molag until the world was created. Mehrunes was freed by Molag's wife and subsequently attacked the lunar lattice, where he became a kinslayer and has been Demon Dagon ever since. The duality of Khajiit worship of the so-called Fire Cat can be seen early in Elsweir's history. During Darlach Bray's reign, cultists of Mehrunes burned down the Grand Archive in Corinth, which contained the province's records from the Merethic era. Despite worshipping the Prince of Destruction himself, the warlord went to great lengths to preserve the remaining texts and hide them across elsewhere, placing them in smaller vaults and archives. Darak Bray showed an ambition much like Mehrunes, conquering Anaquina and its surrounding territories, even erecting some areas in Dagon's name. Next we have coming up some of the cults surrounding Mehrunes Dagon. There are two major cults that are covered on Dagon's lore page. The Order of the Waking Flame, and the one most of us are probably the most familiar with, the Mythic Dawn. We will be starting with the Order of the Waking Flame. The Order of the Waking Flame embraced the beliefs of Sister Seldina, primarily that Mehrunes Dagon was created by the Magna Gay to unmake the flawed creation of Mundus. To them, Mundus is a place of pain and suffering, so they look to Mehrunes Dagon to purge the impurities of existence so that it can be made anew. The cult's High Chronicler documented epics involving Mehrunes Dagon. One such tale says that Dagon does not shy away from bargains. Summoned by the enchanter Arabath for his dominion over fire and flood, the clash between Dagon's flames and Arabath's tidal spell purged local blighted wildlife, ensuring that lush flora would rise from the ashes. The waters receded as her ritual drew more power from the waters than Arabath expected. She could only stare in fright at the mountainous waves speeding towards her from the depths of the ocean itself. Dagon, remembering the bargain, quickly unleashed a spell of his own that matched the ocean's power. Flames swelled up higher than the oncoming wave and turned the rushing water into steam. Arabath found herself unharmed on the beach in a swath of burned forest and steaming tide pools. A season later, all the blighted trees grew healthy branches and prospered. Excerpt from the Epics of Mehrunes Dagon, Volume 1. Another story tells of the Prince of Destruction invading Cold Harbor in order to rescue the enslaved souls of his followers from Molag Bal. His true believers who refused to bend engaged in subterfuge, thwarting Molag Bal and his minions wherever possible. Dagon rewarded those who had remained faithful with a means of escape, a powerful explosion that rattled all of Cold Harbor. This destruction allowed Dagon to manifest within the realm where he fought Molag Bal. Though Dagon's avatar was not enough to defeat Molag Bal in his full power, this distraction bought enough time for his followers to escape into the Deadlands. And now for the Mythic Dawn. The Mythic Dawn is pretty well known for its role in the Elder Scrolls IV, Oblivion. They were the cult which assassinated the Emperor and all of his heirs aside from Martin Septim before attempting to bring Mehrunes Dagon into Tamriel in his true form. Before making its brazen moves at the end of the Third Era, the Mythic Dawn was regarded as one of the most secretive Daedric cults with very little known of them, before their rise to infamy during the Oblivion Crisis. Their beliefs were largely shaped by Mankor Cameron and the commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes. The cult's name, the Mythic Dawn, is a reference to the Dawn Era and Cameron's belief that his cult was destined to rule over a reborn and or liberated Tamriel, ushering in a new Dawn Era. Central to the cult's beliefs is the idea that the divines are false gods, pretenders that have been tricking mortals ever since they first betrayed and attempted to destroy Lorkhan. The cult believes that the Daedra are the true gods of the universe, as they can't die. Cameron also asserts that Lorkhan is truly one of the Daedra, and posits that this is the reason the heart of Lorkhan can't be destroyed. Furthermore, this would mean Tamriel is actually Lorkhan's plane of oblivion. Therefore, Mehrunes Dagon undertook the Oblivion Crisis not to destroy Tamriel, but rather to liberate the occupied lands from the Daedra. Up next, we have the known history of Mehrunes Dagon beginning in the First Era. In ancient times, Mehrunes built the construct Nefara Vigum in order to test any who might seek Mehrunes' razor. This construct was located in Cyrodiil and was first discovered by the Ayleids, who then built a large ringed city, Varsa Balam, to keep pilgrims and other seekers away. In the early days of the First Era, however, the city was infiltrated by a vampire who threw it into chaos with an infestation of undead. The city then suddenly and mysteriously disappeared. Then suddenly Varsa Balam was gone. Historic accounts dispute whether it happened through some final safety, a natural cataclysm, or by the touch of the divines themselves. Whatever the cause, history agrees on the result. The mountains of the eastern Niben swallowed Varsa Balam and the Nefara Vigam with it, where it has remained hidden since the early days of the First Era. An excerpt from Treatise on Ayleidic Cities, Chapter the 10th, Varsa Balam, and the Nefara Vigam, Test of Dagon. Mehrunes Dagon is also said to have destroyed the home of the Sotha house, Old Sotha, sometime in the First Era, with a young Sotha Sil being the only survivor, having been rescued by Vivek. Later, in response to the destruction of Gilverdale at the hands of Molag Bal, Sotha Sil, now acting as a living god, sought out 8 of the most influential princes, with Dagon among them, to establish the Cold Harbor Compact in First Era 2920. Little is known specifically of this deal, but it is theorized to be a measure meant to prevent the direct manifestation of princes on Nirn and limit communication to specified intermediaries such as witches or sorcerers. The Daedric princes I spoke with have agreed to our terms, he said flatly. Disasters such as befell Gilverdale should be averted. Only through certain intermediaries, such as witches or sorcerers, will they answer the call of a man and Myr. Excerpt from 2920 Rain's Hand, Volume 4. Mehrunes Dagon viewed this pact with indifference, though, and later attempted to destroy Mournhold at the behest of an exiled Dunmeri witch, mad with grief. Almalexia and Sotha Sil fought Dagon together amid falling flames and indiscriminate destruction. Almalexia is said to have carved Mehrunes away from himself with Hope Spire, while Sotha Sil bound him with god bronze whips. Mehrunes was allegedly defeated when Sotha Sil whispered Dagon's Nimic, and the prince, quote, unquote, exploded throughout all time. In his defeat, Dagon carried out a final spite by taking a piece of Mournhold with its inhabitants back to the Deadlands with him. Sotha Sil is said to have sealed the planar doors between Nirn and the Deadlands as punishment for breaking the Cold Harbor Compact. The Clockwork Apostles believed that this battle between Mehrunes Dagon and the Tribunal marked the birth of Sarmisanium ghoul things which emerged from Dagon's own flayed skin. The four-armed race of Daedra, known as Runox, are thought by some scholars, mages, and even Runox themselves, to have emerged from Dagon's flesh in the wake of his battle with Almalexia. No one knows what event prompted Mehrunes Dagon to attempt to breach the luminal barriers. It may have been the establishment of the Dragonfires, or even the punishment received for breaking the Cold Harbor Compact. Either way, Dagon began working on methods to bridge the gap between the Deadlands and Nirn in order to begin his invasion. This began initially by refining dimension-hopping technology, starting with simple circular Oblivion portals and later developing into framed doorways known as Oblivion gates. And here we go into Mehrunes Dagon's history in the Second Era, and we have a few subtopics in this area. General lore, the period after the Soul Burst, and then finally the ambitions and the catalyst. We will start with the general section. During the Second Era, several smaller and less influential cults were known to be in operation, such as the Brotherhood of Destruction, from Second Era 115 to Second Era 140, and the Bloodfire cult from Second Era 243 to 244. In particular, the Brotherhood of Destruction's attacks on merchants of the Imperial City would be the first known transgression of Dagonist cults against the Imperial capital. The Emperor Durkarok allied with the Witchmen of Tag Droylok, and with their help subdued their rival clans through Daedric bargains. By Second Era 528, he was an established warlord with 2,000 soldiers, which rose to 10,000 by Second Era 529. A deal was struck with Mehrunes Dagon to ensure Durkarok's crowning, with his sorcerers performing countless tasks and wait for the day when the final part of the arrangement could be carried out, and Dagon would claim his due with the 4 ambitions. What a glorious day! As my prince commanded, I allied myself with the Reachman, Durkarok, also known as the Black Drake, and brokered a deal that will see the powerful barbarian crowned emperor and placed upon the Ruby Throne. From A Deal is Struck, a part of the Daedric Cults collection. Once emperorship was passed to him, Morikar forged the ambitions, which were later entrusted to his son Leovic. While the bargain had been intended to maintain the Longhouse Emperor's grip over Tamriel long past Durkarok's passing, Leovic's decision to legalize Daedra worship led to a large rebellion, which ended in Duke Varin Aquilarios slaying Leovic in the Imperial throne room. Before his death, however, Leovic managed to split apart and scatter the 4 ambitions across Tamriel, where they would be lost for some time. Sometime before the start of the Plane Meld, the Psijic Order took a vested interest in stopping the Order of the Waking Flames activities in Cyrodiil. This goal was shared with the Soldiers of the Void, who had a mutual interest in ensuring Mehrunes Dagon was not summoned to Tamriel. The Waking Flame had planned to summon Zivilai Moath to serve as an emissary on behalf of Dagon. However, the Psijics and the Soldiers of the Void were able to tamper with and interrupt the summoning rituals, which resulted in Moath manifesting in a weakened state, allowing him to be banished back to Oblivion and delay Dagon's arrival. Also, sometime during the Second Era, Hranvard Frostfinger, a witch of Eastmarch, successfully opened a portal to the Deadlands, after sacrificing 13 people in a single night along the coastline of the Sea of Ghosts. Hranvard was ultimately slain by a clan of witch hunters, the Direfrost clan. Still though, before closing, flame is said to have poured from the rift, consuming 30 of the witch hunters, and Dagon's voice boomed out that he would allow one survivor to leave, because he would suffer more among the living. The Mages Guild doubted these claims despite the mirrored sand left behind, and dismissed this as a meteorological phenomenon. Nevertheless, this event resulted in the Direfrost clan pursuing the witch covens of Eastmarch all the more viciously. Now, some major events from after the Soul Burst. Around Second Era 582, High Kinlady Esther took on the role of the leader of the Altmeri separatist movement known as the Veiled Heritants, as she was displeased with the more tolerant Queen Erin and her Aldmeri dominion. In a desperate attempt to delay Queen Erin's troops' arrival in Firsthold, Esther made a deal with Mehrunes Dagon, after which she summoned many Daedra from the Deadlands in Dawnbreak's abandoned mine, after which the Daedra razed the nearby town until the first Auradon Marines arrived to organize evacuations and stop the horde from spreading across the area. An Eye of the Queen also came and defeated the Dremora that had orchestrated the assault. In keeping with the agreement, High Kinlady Esther then unleashed more Daedra at Toranon, a holy site dedicated to the 8 divines in the north, before moving on to her ultimate target, the city of Firsthold. Upon arriving, she was led into the city by its ruler, High Kinlord Rilis VIII, who is oblivious to her true nature. Once in the city, Esther opened 4 Oblivion gates across it, allowing her army of Daedra to lay siege to the city and kidnap the High Kinlord. Esther was slain by a hero, and the Oblivion gates were closed, but most of Firsthold was left in ruins as a result. In the same year, Dagon's Razor Master Urthis attacked the Bosmeri village of Whisper Grove. The forest was set ablaze, the village overrun with Daedra, and a portal to the Deadlands was opened to further the chaos. The village's leader, Gilrain, hired the Undaunted to slay any Dagonites and push back the Daedra. With the defeat of Urthis, Mehrunes Dagon himself offered to close the portal if Gilrain were to agree to meet with him in the Deadlands. Gilrain agreed, and the portal was shut upon her entrance to the Deadlands. whereafter Mehrunes Dagon gave her the means to survive in his realm as a razor master, namely his eponymous razor. Several months thereafter, Phiganian reopened the portal in a desperate bid to save his wife. He sent 2 groups of Undaunted into the portal to retrieve his wife. The first group failed, but the second intervened successfully. The adventurers entered the Knives of Discord region of the Deadlands and defeated Vulcan Scoria, one of Dagon's lieutenants, before successfully rescuing Gilrain and closing the portal. Gilrain was later worried that Mehrunes Dagon would seek her out because she had facilitated the slaying of one of his lieutenants and fled the realm with his razor. Here we have the Ambitions and Cataclysms. This section follows further into the Reachman Emperor Durkarok, who allied with the Tog Droylok Coven. With the help of Mehrunes Dagon and his followers, Durkarok seized the Ruby Throne in Second Era 533. As for the 4 ambitions, Leovic noted that everything must be ready when the time is right, and that within the Longhouse dynasty promises had been made and bargains were set in blood and stone, with Dagon as the prince's way of not accepting failure. Durkarok and Morikar continued the work of the 4 ambitions. Morikos had an annex built beneath the imperial city to house the last of their secrets, a safe haven for others to find so they can carry out the work. With Varin Aquilarios at the gates of the imperial city in Second Era 577 towards the end of the Colovian Revolt, Leovic gathered those who knew part of the plan in the annex to appeal to the Prince of Destruction and seek his help again. Only his steward, Pharaoh Lupus, and the leader of the Order of the Waking Flame knew the entire truth, and even they weren't made privy to the changes needed to be made. The 4 ambitions weren't ready yet, with their time still a few years away, but had they been ready, Leovic would have used them to destroy Varin and save his legacy. Leovic planned that if he failed, the High Priest of the Order of the Waking Flame would have to deal with the others and determine where he moved the ambitions. Leovic was killed by Varin not long after. In Second Era 582, Pharaoh Lupus sent Evely Sharparrow to find a book which put her on the trail of Leovic's secret, informing her that the Emperor's secret concerns a deal with Mehrunes Dagon and the 4 ambitions. Lupus was then assassinated by the Order of the Waking Flame, disguising itself as the Dark Brotherhood, prompting Evely and the Vestige to visit the Nasalis Cache Annex. Here they rediscovered a ritual which indicated that the cult planned to use the shrine there to learn the locations of the ambitions and followed Doombringer Eshel into the Deadlands. Eshel was defeated by Evely and the Vestige after being sent to recover the ambitions by Dagon, who was dismayed that they had been unfulfilled and misplaced. After much effort invested, the Vestige and Evely worked to uncover the mystery of the 4 ambitions and sought to warn the surviving counselors, most of which were in the Blackwood region of Cyrodiil. Most of the counselors had already come to terms with the fall of the Longhouse Emperors and managed to hang on to positions of importance. For instance, Counselor Tarnian Leviticus served as a legate in the Chamber of Legates of Leowin. However, Counselor Urtis Vandacia, High Priest of the Order of the Waking Flame, still harbored designs of seizing power for himself, a result of the Daedric power of the pact with Dagon and the 4 ambitions. Vandacia and his Waking Flame eliminated many of his fellow counselors but framed the Dark Brotherhood. The Vestige and their allies raced to find the 4 ambitions before Vandacia, and the ambitions would turn out not to be conventional weapons, but instead were people whose purpose was to be empowered at birth for the sake of being sacrificed later by one who sought power. Vandacia sent an army to capture the 3 known ambitions and quickly moved them from the poorly protected city of Gideon to the much more sturdy imperial fort Redmane. The bulk of this army was defeated just outside of the fort, but Vandacia and a powerful group of cultists were able to get into the fort using portal magic. One of the ambitions, Destron, was sacrificed by Vandacia, who seized his power and attempted to merge Nirn with the Deadlands. This was a dangerous process that could have destroyed both realms if disrupted and enabled Mehrunes Dagon to participate in the battle. However, Vandacia was defeated, ending the merge and banishing Dagon once again. The two known surviving ambitions, Sombren and Kalia, realized their power was too uncontrollable to remain in Tamriel until they could properly channel it, and they would have to hide in the Deadlands to dampen it. During this time, the Vestige resolved to search for the missing fourth ambition. Mehrunes Dagon also attempted to claim the demi-plane of Fargrave, as it would be a convenient way station between Nirn and the rest of Oblivion, which would position him to bypass the restrictions Sotha Sil had imposed on his realm due to his breaking of the Cold Harbor Compact, sealing the planar connections between the Deadlands and Nirn. The Waking Flame attempted to facilitate the conquest of Fargrave with the use of votive runes, glyphs containing Dagonic prayers. The runes would siphon the emotional energy of the mortal inhabitants, which would eventually overwhelm them and render them unresponsive. This drained energy would then be used to discorporate all Daedra in Fargrave at once, leaving the realm defenseless against Dagon's forces. This plan was, however, foiled by the Vestige. Unfortunately for the prince, infighting broke out among his forces and led to their defeat. After it was discovered that the four ambitions had been imbued with the power of Dagon's Nimic, Sombren, influenced by the Mysterium Xarxes, opened a portal between Dagon's capital, Destruction Solace, and Fort Sundercliff, allowing the prince to manifest on Nirn. However, Mehrunes and Sombren were followed by a force led by the Vestige, who interrupted their ritual, and another ambition, Mehrid, was able to steal power back from Sombren, and then use Dagon's ego Nimic to bind and weaken the prince. With the help of the Vestige, Dagon's physical form was destroyed, and he was banished to the deepest parts of the Deadlands using his ego Nimic. This reversed the attempted merging of the realms and mitigated the destruction to Sundercliff as well as the surrounding area. Now for the Third Era. Before Third Era 172, and possibly before the Interregnum, Chimere Gragan, a Dureni retainer and noted Daedra summoner, made a pact with Mehrunes Dagon. The conjurer deceived the prince, tricking him into an oath he had no intention of keeping, while wearing the hide of the Savior, which protected him from the blows of oath-breakers, as Dagon now was, which gave Chimere the chance to invoke Dagon's protonymic and banish him. Chimere used Dagon's protonymic in an incantation to invoke a sorcery that would gradually drain all of Dagon's power into the void. Chimere miscalculated, however, not realizing that Dagon's resistance could slow the draining of his power, even if it could not stop it. As a result, Dagon had the time to curse Chimere with a literal fulfillment of the terms of his bargain with Chimere. Rather than let his power drain into the void, Dagon cast it all into his curse. As a result, Kaysali Island was cast into the void, all of its citizens were horribly slain, and Chimere was condemned to live forever among the ruins of his greatest ambition. An excerpt from Tal Morog, Kerr's research. The plane where the island wound up would come to be known as Chimera of Desolation. The period of the Third Era, known as the Imperial Simulacrum, also had Dagon's hand at play, assisting battle mage Jagger Tharn in impersonating Emperor Uriel Septim VII and holding the Emperor in one of his many dark prisons after the Emperor's banishment by Tharn using the Staff of Chaos. During this period, Zivile Moath would take it upon himself to move upon the battle spire and engineer Jagger Tharn's involvement after several failed invasion attempts by Mehrunes Dagon. Dagon and his forces were free to invade the War College as a part of their bargain in exchange for the slaying of the 5 battle mage administrators who governed it, as Jagger Tharn hoped to put to rest any competition for his position as Imperial battle mage. In Third Era 398, Mehrunes Dagon had his prize. The prince's forces, led by Imago Storm of Clan Dramora, mustered in the Havoc Wellhead, before raging through 2 other planes on their way to the Battle Spire, the Shade Perilous of Nocturnal, and the Sul-Xan. Shade Perilous was home to 2 Daedra clans, the Seducers and the Nocturnals. The Nocturnals became prisoners in their own realm, while the lordless Seducers bent to Dagon's will, some even willingly, becoming more powerful as a result. These so-called Dark Seducers joined Dagon's ranks, with some being given Daedric crescents to wield in battle. And just as an aside, you can actually get a Daedric crescent in Morrowind, which functions as a 2-handed long blade and has some pretty sweet enchantments on it. It's pretty fun to play around with, honestly. But back to the lore. One Dark Seducer in particular became Mehrunes Dagon's bodyguard and lover, and was trusted by the prince with the sword of the Moon Reaver. Once the Battle Spire was taken, the Weregate, a portal to Tamriel, was personally sealed by Dagon. Unaware of these events, a pair of apprentice battle mages entered the Battle Spire after it was already fallen. One apprentice went ahead, leaving behind notes and other useful items, but was eventually captured. The second apprentice went in search of the first, as well as for a way back to Tamriel, fighting, bluffing, and negotiating past a variety of obstacles along the way. Upon following the path to the Shade Perilous, the apprentice befriended the Nocturnals and freed their leader, Jaciel Morgan. Oddly enough, Clan Dremora also offered its assistance against Mehrunes Dagon, because while Dagon had sanctioned his army's entrance to the Shade Perilous to use it as a way station for the assault on the Battle Spire, he had not approved its overthrow or occupation. Instead of negotiating for passage or showing restraint, Dagon's protégés and adoptive children, Phaedra Chardé of the Fire Daedra clan and Zivile Moath of the Frost Daedra clan, decided to crush their longtime enemies, the Nocturnals. The Dremora clan believed this needed to be undone in order to rectify things. From here, the path from the Shade Perilous led to the Chimera of Desolation. While here, the apprentice became the hare in a great hunt, where the apprentice encountered Chimere Gragan, and Chimere drew on his past experience with Mehrunes Dagon to offer help. He offered up the Savior's Hide and Dagon's proto-Nimic. However, the prince had already added an as of yet unknown Neo-Nimic as well. After passing through the Chimera, the apprentice entered the wellhead and came face to face with Grand Vizier Imago Storm of the Dremora, who was of the opinion that by taking both the Shade Peril and Battle Spire, Clan Dagon had overextended on both resources and judgment. He felt it would be best if Phaedra, Zivile, and Mehrunes Dagon were temporarily removed from the situation so that he could restore order and stability to Clan Dagon. The apprentice was then given the Neo-Nimics of all 3 entities in order for this plan to work. The apprentice then went into the Deadlands near Dagon's hunting lodge. According to the Dremora, banishing Mehrunes Dagon would require the armor of the Savior's Hide, his proto and Neo-Nimics, the aid of so-called absent friends, a bit of hope, and a weapon from Dagon's own substance, namely the sword of the Moon Reaver. The last item was soon taken by force from Dagon's Dark Seducer lover, and the apprentice battled up a mountainside, then entered the Hunter Lodge to face Dagon himself. Dagon was waiting in his inner sanctum with the first apprentice chained to the ceiling and paralyzed. Dagon began this encounter in a smug manner, but became worried upon seeing that the Savior's Hide protected the apprentice from paralysis. The apprentice had knowledge of Dagon's Nimics, and revealed that they were carrying the Moon Reaver. Dagon moved to eliminate the apprentice, but the apprentice distracted him by summoning Jaciel Morgan to the battle, before striking him with the Moon Reaver and causing him to be banished to the void. Though Dagon was banished, the force unleashed on the Battle Spire left it partly in ruins. With Mehrunes Dagon gone, Jagged Tharn's schemes began to fall apart. Around 3rd Era 399, when the Eternal Champion reunited the 8 pieces of the Staff of Chaos and linked it back to the Jewel of Fire, The combined energies of the staff and Tharn's life force were released in a powerful surge that destroyed the battle mage and opened a gate which freed Uriel Septim VII. After the simulacrum period in the 5th century of the Third Era, Dagon continued his schemes. In Third Era 405, Dagon passed on his razor to the Agent, and in Third Era 427, he sent the Nerevarine to retrieve this same artifact before restoring it and allowing them to keep it. Several years after the events of Morrowind, the Oblivion crisis would take place. In Third Era 433, what became the final year of the Third Era, Mehrunes Dagon invaded Nirn, with the help of the Mythic Dawn. This cult believed that Nirn was Dagon's plane to begin with, and worked to bring about his invasion by assassinating the Emperor as well as his known heirs, therefore causing the covenant with Akatosh, which protected the mortal plane, to be broken. With every Oblivion gate that opened, the barriers between Nirn and Oblivion weakened further. This would have eventually led to the total collapse of the barriers between the worlds and the complete joining of Nirn to Oblivion. Dagon himself made a brief and dramatic appearance as a gigantic four-armed humanoid armed with an axe and talons at the climax of the crisis. At the White Gold Tower's Temple of the One, Martin Septim shattered the Amulet of Kings, transforming himself into an avatar of Akatosh. Dagon was handily defeated, after which the avatar turned into a statue at the center of the ruined temple. It is believed that the jaws of Oblivion have now been permanently sealed. In the Fourth Era, Dagon continued to plot a way to bypass the barriers keeping him out of Nirn. Being aware of the prophecy of the last Dragonborn, Mehrunes Dagon reached out in dreams to a Dunmer named Vonos to revive the Mythic Dawn cult and build a new following. In 4th Era 200, this revived Mythic Dawn was led by Dagon to an old and buried temple of the cult where they were tasked with rebuilding a dormant Oblivion gate. This gate was cleansed by the offerings of personal blood sacrifices of Dagon's followers. By 4th Era 201, Mehrunes' razor had arrived in Skyrim. In several broken pieces, the last Dragonborn collected these pieces for the Mythic Dawn Museum in Dawnstar before being offered the restored razor by Dagon in exchange for slaying the museum's proprietor. Later the Dragonborn would catch word of the revived Mythic Dawn schemes and attempt to stop them. After preventing the cult's retrieval of a great Welkin stone from the ruins of Riel, the Dragonborn would journey to the cult's temple. Here the Dragonborn slew Vonos with the great Welkin stone in their possession, whereupon it was revealed that Vonos had offered himself as a sacrifice, making this exactly what was needed to open the gate. As the last Dragonborn was blessed by Akatosh himself, the same being that sealed Oblivion would by extension be the key to opening the way again. Despite being just one gate, this unwitting sacrifice produced a foothold which could not be closed, as the sigil stone had been disposed of. Now, even if defeated again, Dagon could rebuild once more. Regardless, the last Dragonborn entered the Deadlands and defeated the lieutenants of this region. Afterwards, the Vigil of Stendarr arrived and took up the duty of guarding this gate. And before anyone says anything, I know that this was from a mod, but technically it is an officially supported mod, and from what I understand, it's kind of like semi-canon because it's officially supported, so I just thought that I would include it. You don't have to like it yourself, I'm kind of indifferent to it. And moving on. Now at this point I began worrying that my script was starting to run for too long, so I decided not to go deeper into the 4 ambitions topic, since their intended role and purpose was mentioned and gone over a decent amount in the Second Era history section, and I thought I'd pass over the Deadlands section as well, since the Deadlands have been gone over in general with details sprinkled in throughout this whole video. So instead I thought I'd wrap up by covering 3 artifacts associated with Dagon and the 3 lesser realms that have connections to him. But if you would like to see the other artifacts or read the 2 topics I've skipped for time, then they are available in the main Mehrunes lore article, which will be linked in the description of this video. These topics are found near the bottom of the article. And I'll start with the 3 artifacts: the Daedric Crescent, Ground Splitters, and of course, Dagon's most recognized artifact, Mehrunes Razor. The Daedric Crescent Blade, known also as the Battle Scythe Blade, is a Daedric artifact created by the Prince of Destruction. It has the power to paralyze those it strikes, and heavily damage their armor. It has also been known to create a green ball of energy, but its effects are unknown. At one time there were many Crescent Blades, which were used by Dagon's forces to take the Battle Spire during the Imperial Simulacrum. When the Empire later reclaimed the Ruined Academy, the Crescents were gathered up and destroyed, except for one. Unbeknownst to the Empire, one of these unique blades remained in existence somewhere in Tamriel, although none have ever seen it. Now, in Morrowind you can find one of these unique blades by going to Divaith Fyr's tower and opening a level 100 locked lockbox near the wizard, which will have an amulet that can take you to the location of this blade. Now, next up are the Ground Splitters. The Ground Splitters are a pair of Sabatons associated with the Prince Mehrunes Dagon. Their enchantment reflects their creator's obsession with destruction. This artifact causes the wearer's stride to be comparable to that of a giant, despite a lack of significant weight when not worn. These Sabatons are essentially a weapon capable of turning those they kick into a paste. On a larger scale, forceful stomps may create fissures, and a careless bearer might become a statistic in a self-created catastrophe. And the last artifact is Mehrunes Razor, probably his best known one, as it's been in several games. Also known as the Dagger of the Final Wounds, the Bane of the Righteous, and the Kingslayer, this powerful ebony dagger is said to have the ability to end life instantly. It is Daedric in appearance, emblazoned with Daedric script, and is seemingly able to drink light that hits it. Now, after that quick description, the 3 minor realms that have a connection to Mehrunes Dagon. These are the Chimera of Desolation, Deadlight, and the Havoc Wellhead. The Chimera of Desolation was created by Mehrunes Dagon as an act of revenge against the conjurer Chimere Gragan, whereby the entire island of Caseley was cast into the void during the Third Era. The island had been located off the coast of Northmoor, or by some accounts, Glenumbra in High Rock. 2 abandoned towns still stand on the now desolate island, Tribador and Grenvalusa. The plain was once accessible through the Battle Spire, but this link was severed after Dagon's invasion of the edifice during the Imperial Simulacrum. And upon Dagon's banishment at the end of the Oblivion Crisis, Caseley was returned back to Tamriel. Next, we have Deadlight. Deadlight is a shattered plane of Oblivion said to have been destroyed by Dagon in the ancient past. Legend states that the realm was once ruled by a forgotten Daedric prince who had earned Dagon's wrath. Dagon waged war upon this forgotten prince until nothing remained of this realm but a shattered fragment, illuminated by a ghostly green aura. The realm possesses a ruined keep which stands beneath a starless sky. The plane itself is devoid of life and energy, which is unusual for an Oblivion realm. And the surrounding landscape consists of jagged peaks dotted with lightning rods and flora of the Deadlands, such as bloodgrass. The only known interest to this realm is a crumbling portal dais called the Western Gate, located in a region of the Deadlands known as the Burn. Lastly, we have the Havoc Wellhead. The Havoc Wellhead is a realm of Oblivion controlled by many Daedric clans in the service of Mehrunes Dagon. It acts as one of many provincial governmental centers for Dagon. It was previously accessible from the Battle Spire, but the connection was lost during the destruction wreaked at the end of the Imperial Simulacrum. Now, after those quick descriptions, I'd like to thank everyone for checking this video out if you're still here. This is the longest script that I've done so far, and I hope that I wasn't too bad at it. And I hope everyone enjoyed. If you'd like to see me continue to do this and get better at it, please like and subscribe. And have a nice day, everyone.